The physicists are saying precisely the same thing, that space-time is doomed. We've assumed that space-time is fundamental. We've assumed that for several centuries, and it's been very useful. So all the things that you were mentioning, the particles and all the work that's been done, that's all been done in space-time. But now physicists are saying space-time is doomed. There's no such thing as space-time fundamentally in the laws of physics.
Chris Lato, welcome to Lato Files. Space-time is dead. You heard it here first or second if you watched that amazing interview between Donald Hoffman and Lex Fridman on a Lex Fridman podcast. Donald Hoffman is an American cognitive psychologist and famous science author. He's a professor in the Department of Cognitive Sciences at the University of California, Irvine. Hoffman studies consciousness, visual perception, and evolutionary psychology using mathematical models and psychophysical experiments. He has a famous 2015 TED Talk, Do We See Reality as It Is? Donald Hoffman is a breath of fresh air, man. He is like one of the first scientists that I've seen to actually go all in and follow the evidence to realize space-time is dead. Space-time is dead. Now, what does that mean? He goes in through it. It doesn't mean space-time doesn't work. Okay, it's very useful. It's an extremely useful tool. But the point is, it's not the foundation of our universe. It is not the base building block. And he makes the argument here that consciousness, Hoffman argues, is the base construct. It's not space-time. Okay, space-time comes out of consciousness. This video is an introduction, my general impressions of Donald Hoffman's theory, how it relates to my own theory. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Smash that like button if you do like this content, and subscribe to get notifications of future videos. I release a video every Friday, and support the channel on patreon.com/Chris Lato. Let's get on to the video.
The physicists are saying precisely the same thing, that space-time is doomed. We've assumed that space-time is fundamental. We've assumed that for several centuries, and it's been very useful. So all the things that you were mentioning, the particles and all the work that's been done, that's all been done in space-time. But now physicists are saying space-time is doomed. There's no such thing as space-time fundamentally in the laws of physics. And that comes actually out of gravity together with quantum field theory. It just comes right out of it. It's a theorem of those two theories put together.
So Hoffman is not a physicist, but he talks to physicists. And what he says is they are finding that at the deepest levels, it doesn't work. Okay, space-time does not provide any values. You're basically staying inside of the same system. Okay, you're not actually learning any deep insights into what's behind the system. All you're doing is mapping it. And he relates it to an actual computer desktop. So what we're seeing is just an interface. Reality, space-time is an overlay. It's a GUI, if you will, or what he calls a multimodal user interface. So MUI, multimodal user interface. So that theory, what does MUI theory state? That perceptual experiences do not match our approximate properties of the objective world, but instead provide a simplified species-specific user interface to that world. So what he's postulating here, and he goes into this interview and gives a lot more detail, is that we are a specific construct, basically a unique entity, and he defines it as a conscious agent. We are actually conscious agents of human origin related to human consciousness. So quite amazing. He uses the metaphor of the desktop. So the computer desktop is the icons. The icons of the computer desktop provide the functional interface, so that the user does not have to deal with the underlying programming and electronics to use the computer efficiently. So all we're seeing is a representation of reality. We're not actually seeing reality. This is through his multimodal user interface theory. So this theory, MUI theory, implies epiphysicalism. So that means physical objects such as quarks and brains and stars are constructed by conscious agents. But such physical objects don't actually have causal power. So it's actually the conscious agents, the experiences, that are creating everything. This is what he calls conscious reality.
So all the things that you were mentioning, the particles and all the work that's been done, that's all been done in space-time. But now physicists are saying space-time is doomed. There's no such thing as space-time fundamentally in the laws of physics. And that comes actually out of gravity together with quantum field theory. It just comes right out of it. It's a theorem of those two theories put together. But it doesn't tell you what's behind it. So the physicists know that their best theories, Einstein's gravity and quantum field theory put together, entail that space-time cannot be fundamental, and therefore particles in space-time cannot be fundamental. They're just irreducible representations of the symmetries of space-time. That's what they are.
So Hoffman's saying that space-time is just an interface. It's just a perception that we are given through evolution. Given through evolution, it's a mapping, if you will, of the actual theory. Mentions this as an interface theory of perception. An interface theory of perception is the idea that our experiences, our perceptual experiences, don't necessarily map onto what exists in reality itself.
So space-time, so we put the two together. We put together what the physicists are discovering, and we can talk about how they do that. And then the new discoveries from evolution by natural selection. Both of these discoveries are really in the last 20 years. And what both are saying is space-time has had a good ride. It's been very useful. Reductionism has been useful, but it's over. And it's time for us to go beyond.
When you say space-time is doomed, is it the space? Is it the time? Is it the very hard-coded specification of 4 dimensions? Or are you specifically referring to the kind of perceptual domain that humans operate in, which is space-time? You think like there's a 3D, like our world is 3-dimensional and time progresses forward, therefore 3 dimensions plus 1, 4D. What exactly do you mean by space-time? What do you mean by space-time is doomed?
Great. So this is, by the way, not my quote. This is from, for example, Nima Arkani-Hamed at the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton, Ed Witten, also there, David Gross, Nobel Prize winner. So this is not just something the cognitive scientists, this is what the physicists are saying.
Yeah, the physicists are space-time skeptics.
Yeah, they're saying that, and I can say exactly why they think it's doomed, but what they're saying is that, because your question was, what aspect of space-time, what are we talking about here? It's both space and time, their union into space-time as in Einstein's theory. That's doomed. Mm-hmm. And they're basically saying that even quantum theory, this is with Nima Arkani-Hamed especially, so Hilbert spaces will not be fundamental either. So that the notion of Hilbert space, which is really critical to quantum field theory, quantum information theory, that's not going to figure in the fundamental new laws of physics. So what they're looking for is some new mathematical structures beyond space-time, beyond Einstein's 4-dimensional space-time or supersymmetric version, geometric algebra signature 2,4 kind of. There are different ways that you can represent it, but they're finding new structures. And by the way, they're succeeding now. They found something called the amplituhedron. This is Nima and his colleagues. The cosmological polytope. There are these like polytopes, these polyhedra in multi dimensions, generalizations of simplices that are coding for example, the scattering amplitudes of processes in the Large Hadron Collider and other colliders.
So maps are a great example, okay? This is a representation of the actual real world, okay? This is not the real world, I think we can both argue, okay? This is a representation of the real world. But it can be useful to describe, okay, how you could go from the glass bottom boat tours here, right? I could describe to you how to go over here to Lover's Cove. I could tell you how to walk in that direction, okay, using my own perception of the world, etc. Okay, I could give you basic directions. Okay, that'll make sense, right, on this scale. But now as we zoom out, okay, that is not going to work as we get further out, okay? As the scales change, our model, as we try and lay over that, our projection is not going to map, okay? There'll be many problems. So now if I want to tell you how to get from here, okay, to the other side of the US. Now I'm going to have to use a different set of instructions, right? I'm going to have to use a different mental model, okay? And as we zoom out more, okay, if you can imagine the Earth itself, okay, if I'm trying to describe to you how to go to the next solar system over, this simple mapping, this 2-dimensional mapping system that we have will not necessarily work, okay? It's going to reach its limits because it doesn't actually show the underlying reality. The underlying reality of the Earth would be a globe. right? And we have these issues all the time. As you go up, we have many different types of projection that try to map the reality of the Earth, right? But a globe is probably the best. But even then, it's just a little model. It's not going to take everything into account. It's just a model with the underlying reality. So space-time is a model. And what they found is it's not the underlying reality. It is not the base of everything. So we haven't yet achieved consciousness from material objects. Okay, there's not one case, Hoffman points out in this, there hasn't been one case where actually we're able to create a conscious network. Not one. And that's the argument Hoffman is making, is that consciousness is the base and creates the physical world, which is not even really physical. Okay, it's just perceptions in our mind, crazy thoughts.
So they're finding that if they let go of space-time completely, they're finding new ways of computing these scattering amplitudes that turn literally billions of terms into one term. When you do it in space and time, because it's the wrong framework, it's just a user interface. That's now from the evolutionary point of view, it's just user interface. It's not a deep insight into the nature of reality. So it's missing deep symmetry. It's something called a dual conformal symmetry, which turns out to be true of the scattering data, but you can't see it in space-time. And it's making the computations way too complicated because you're trying to compute all the loops and Feynman diagrams and all the Feynman integrals. So see, the Feynman approach to the scattering amplitudes is trying to enforce two critical properties of space-time: locality and unitarity. And so when you enforce those, you get all these loops and multiple, different levels of loops. And for each of those, you have to add new terms to your computation. But when you do it outside of space-time, you don't have the notion of unitarity. You don't have the notion of locality. You have something deeper, and it's capturing some symmetries that are actually true of the data. But then when you look at the geometry of the facets of these polytopes, then certain of them will code for unitarity and locality. So it actually comes out of the structure of these deep polytopes. So what we're finding is there's this whole new world now beyond space-time that is making explicit symmetries that are true of the data that cannot be seen in space-time, and that is turning the computations from billions of terms to one or two or a handful of terms. So we're getting insights into symmetries, and all of a sudden the math is becoming simple because we're not doing something silly. We're not adding up all these loops in space-time.
And I think this is why we're going to see just amazing breakthroughs coming shortly, okay? Because for the last however many decades, at least several decades, our science, our physics has been in this loop, okay, where they've created this model that doesn't accurately represent the reality. If you think the Earth is the center of the universe, your math is going to be incredibly, incredibly complex to try and map out the stars and the planets, right? But if you take the sun as the center of the solar system, all of a sudden all your math makes sense, okay? It's all easy. You have much simpler terms. You have simpler math. And so what Hoffman argues they've been doing is with the Feynman approaches, okay, they're taking a square hole, okay, they're trying to impose these requirements onto nature reality. And what that causes is insane math problems, okay, because it's not real. It's not the reality, okay? Reality is normally, it's complex, but in many ways it can be much, much simpler if you actually know what you're looking at, if you can actually identify the core structure, which Hoffman argues is outside of space-time. It's outside of space-time.
We're doing something far deeper. But they don't know what this world is about. So, they're in an interesting position where we know that space-time is doomed, and I should probably tell you why it's doomed, what they're saying about why it's doomed. But they need a flashlight to look beyond space-time. What flashlight are we going to use to look into the dark beyond space-time? Because Einstein's theory and quantum theory can't tell us what's beyond them. All they can do is tell us that when you put us together, space-time is doomed at 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, 10 to the minus 43 seconds. Beyond that, space-time doesn't even make sense. It just has no operational definition.
So those sizes, once you get out to small enough sizes, small enough times, what they find is it breaks down. It's very similar to how Newtonian mechanics break down when you get into space, right? When you get into those sort of speeds and relativistic speeds, your Newtonian model doesn't work. You need a new model, and that was the space-time model. But now that we're getting further, okay, as our science has progressed, what we're finding is it doesn't work. Okay, space-time is not the end all. Similar to Newtonian mechanics, it's a model. It's an extremely useful model that has given us many advancements. but it's not actual truth. Okay, it's not the reality. It's just a model of the reality. So the question is here, what is beyond space-time? Donald Hoffman does actually propose his theory. He calls it conscious realism. So his argument is that perception of the physical world is a byproduct of consciousness, just a perception. So together, Mui theory and conscious realism form the foundation of an overall theory. I think of it as idealism. Is described as a non-physicalist monism. Okay, so there's basically one all-purpose being, which holds that consciousness is the primary reality and the physical world emerges from that. The objective world consists of conscious agents and their experiences. What exists in the objective world, independent of my perceptions, is a world of conscious agents, not a world of unconscious particles and fields. So the current thinking that Hoffman says 99% of his peers are fervently believing, they believe this wholeheartedly, is that space-time is the end-all be-all, and they are specifically working inside that medium. So they will never find the reality because all they're looking is inside of the model. Okay, they're looking at the graphical interface on the computer and trying to understand how the actual computer works and computes. It's not going to be possible, right? Because you're inside of the actual system. You need something outside of the substrate. I've talked to this in my first video on what are UAPs. Is really how does information actually get transferred? What is the substrate? What is the underlying base that this universe is written in, the information that is written in? And Donald Hoffman says that it is consciousness, one being of consciousness, just the fact of being. And so split out from that, we could have thousands to infinity number of other conscious agents out there, other consciouses, not even human related, not even related to our universe, separate, complete. And in this case is where I see a potential for unidentified aerial phenomena. Okay, so other conscious agents. If you look at my last video from a few weeks ago, Jacques Vallée, he wrote a paper with Eric Davis back in 2005, arguing that the phenomena, UAPs, are a physical and psychic technology. It's a technology that induces physical and psychic effects in humans to reach some cultural goal. In that sense, and this sounds a lot like a conscious agent, if you will, larger conscious agent, or coming from outside of space-time, some sort of consciousness field, etc., that actually gets to our physical reality, that would explain all of these effects that we're seeing, okay, from the double slit experiment. Brought that up before. That has broken our physics, okay? Finally, to see a scientist pushing this theory, especially from an evolutionary gene standpoint, I think we can learn so much from how nature actually works. That's what I propose in my theory, is that we're looking down at the natural world. Just use that same model to look up into the larger cosmos. And it's exactly that study, evolutionary biology, computer science, that has given Donald Hoffman, I think, insights into the nature of reality. I'm so happy he's come up with this theory. A final point of his theory I'll make is implications from evolution. So what he's learned. Hoffman argues that natural selection is necessarily directed toward fitness payoffs, and that organisms develop internal models of reality that increase these fitness payoffs. This means that organisms develop a perception of the world that's directed toward fitness and not of reality. So this means is that there's nothing in our evolution that has prepared us for or directed us towards truth, actually finding the reality of the world we're in, the universe we're in. Everything in evolution directs us towards surviving, towards fitness, surviving and fitting in and replicating. That's it. So it's on purpose. That's his argument, is evolution has hidden the truth from us because there's no reason to find the truth. It doesn't help you stay in the universe longer or replicate or continue his life. That plays no help or benefit. All it is about maintaining fitness, okay? Survival of the fittest. That's what he learned from evolution. If you want to see other proof of this science, ION, so the Institute of Noetic Science, was founded by Edgar Mitchell and basically searches through and tries to find out what is going on with all these things. They have actual scientific papers about this subject. If you want to learn more, I have a video. You can click on the video here from Dr. Dean Radin. Dr. Radin has been doing studies to look into this, specifically on can an observer make a difference into a double slit experiment online, etc. The results are astounding, and I think those 99% of those scientists that Donald Hoffman's talking about simply will not look at the results. The results are out there. They can be replicated. These experiments can be replicated and can show that space-time is not the base layer. It's actually something else, and it looks like could be consciousness, which is amazing so happy to see we finally will get some breakthroughs. If we can turn that 99% just to be more open-minded, I think your billions of terms, those math problems where they go from billions of terms down to one, man, that gives you a lot of value in the real world. I mean, imagine that, understanding the real world, how it works. If it's just a map, just a data structure, imagine that. If the universe is just a data structure, man, moving around data is pretty easy. Maybe that's how they're able to do all these things. Maybe that's how you can go faster than light, right? Because you're outside of the data structure.
In 1890, it was a lot of physicists thought we'd arrived. They were discouraging bright young students from going into physics because it was all done. And that's precisely the wrong attitude.
Yep.
Forever. It's the wrong attitude forever. The attitude we should have is a century from now, they'll be looking at us and laughing at what we didn't know. And we just have to assume that that's going to be the case. Just know that everything that we think is so brilliant right now, our final theory of everything, a century from now, they'll look at us like we look at the physicists of 1890 and go, how could they have been so dumb?
Crazy stuff, guys. Thanks for being here. Please smash that like button. Let me know in the comments what you think of this theory. I'll try to read all the comments best I can. Subscribe to get future notifications of my videos. Check out our sister channel, UAPsociety.com. If you want to support the channel, go to patreon.com/Chris Lato. Support the channel, join the UAP squadron. And as always, we're on UAPsociety.com. If you want to get your hands dirty, support us with merch in the description. Thanks again for being here, everybody. Peace.